Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to another episode of the Raw Prospect Podcast, episode 201 today for our bi-weekly power rankings. Today's episode is is week 10 power rankings. Going through our top 10. We're each created our lists already, and we're just going to run through it. But before we get into it, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Leave a like on the video and share it with your friends. Share it with all of your sport watching people out there. But joining me from Houston, Texas, the Stat King himself, Mr. Michael Ween. How you doing?
Boy, oh boy, we just got some breaking news in. Adam Schefter breaking the news. Have you heard it yet?
No.
Um, well, I'll wait. How is everybody doing on this Wednesday night? Actually, Thursday night. After we just saw the Baltimore Ravens improve to 8-3, defeating the Cincinnati Bengals. There's significant injury news, though, coming out of that game. We'll get to that in a second. And it's not maybe what you're thinking. It's not Joe Burrow. It has to do with a specific Ravens player that's pretty important to their team that likely is out for the season. Ravens head coach John Harbaugh says Mark Andrews has a likely season-ending ankle injury. They will get an MRI tomorrow to confirm the damage. I actually have not laid out my list yet, but I think I have it pretty laid out in my mind. It's just not written down as it would be. So let's go ahead and waste no time. I know it's 11 p.m., so let's get right into this.
Yeah. I'll start out with my number 10. At number 10, I had the Buffalo Bills. Um, it's tough right now to really gauge where they're really at. And it was hard for me to move them below the teams behind them as well, because I believe they're a step ahead of, say, Deshaun Watson list Cleveland Browns, as crazy as that might seem after seeing them lose to the Broncos. But even so, I think you make some adjustments to this offense, get the run game going a little bit, and then I think there will be a much better brand of football ahead for the Bills. I really do believe that. Now they do have a very rough schedule up ahead, and whether they can get through that and still be in the playoff mix is yet to be seen. But as of right now, I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt and leaving them at number 10.
Okay. I'm giving the Houston Texans my number 10 spot for this week. First of all, we all know about CJ Stroud. We talked about him extensively on Monday's episode of Raw Rundown. He leads the AFC in passing yards. And, he's played himself out of the, oh my gosh, look at this rookie conversation into possibly being on the outskirts or at least on the periphery of the MVP conversation. He's thrown for 826 yards the past 2 weeks, making him just the second rookie ever after Cam Newton did it to throw for more than 800 yards in a 2-game span. The Texans are second in the NFL in passing yards offense, in passing yards per game. A lot of that having to do with CJ Stroud, but also this offensive line, which has been banged up throughout the season, has only given up 19 sacks this year. That's the 6th lowest rate in the league. So they're playing, I think, above the line of what I would expect them to play. CJ Stroud isn't turning the ball over. 16 touchdowns to only 2 interceptions. They had 9 explosive plays on Sunday against Cincinnati, and Stroud finished with 9 yards per attempt. I think their offense is going to continue to play really good football, especially when they get a little bit more healthy. They get Dameon Pierce back. I believe in this head coach quarterback duo. And if you look at their schedule as opposed to Buffalo, nothing's easy sledding in the National Football League, but the rest of the way, as of right now, they have just 2 games remaining on their schedule against opponents that currently have winning records. And I think not only could they challenge for a wild card spot, I mean, they're technically still in the division race too, but I think if they get this kind of quarterback play, they have a good head coach. I think they could win a playoff game. Now, I'm not predicting that, but I think for right now, I would put them at number 10. I'd give them the benefit of the doubt. I think they've shown enough to this point. They had that win over Jacksonville earlier on in the season. They just beat Cincinnati on the road. If they really show up and big boy the Arizona Cardinals this weekend like they're supposed to, I think that'll only continue to reinforce my belief in this Texans team.
Yeah, I actually agree with you. I think I'm going to switch out the Buffalo Bills just because of the bad vibes that are coming out of Buffalo this week. It would just feel weird to have them slotted ahead of this upstart Houston, Texas team. And I think I'll move the Texans to 10. But for my number 9 team, this is a interesting conversation now that we've seen the results of the Thursday night game where now we're questioning the health of Joe Burrow. But I think I'm going to leave my rankings as is and not adjust them based on the Joe Burrow injury just because we don't know much about it yet. So with that being said, I'm going to keep the Jacksonville Jaguars at number 9. They came off a tough loss this week against the San Francisco 49ers. And, I had them ranked pretty low last week at number 10. And I just see them in the 7 to 10 range. I think they're like a tier gap below like the top teams in the AFC. And just until we see some, consistency in terms of, taking care of the football, just finishing drives and, playing the brand of football we know they're capable of on a consistent basis, then they'll continue to be in that 7 to 10 range. But they do have a lot of opportunities here moving forward to prove themselves. They play the Ravens. I believe they play the Bengals and the Browns as well in these upcoming few weeks.
Yeah, I had the Jaguars at number 9 as well. I moved them down a little bit this week, and it's not necessarily because they got destroyed by San Francisco. San Francisco is, when healthy, a top 3, maybe even a top 2 team in football. And they have done that to a bunch of good teams this year. And I think sometimes, we've seen this happen to a couple good teams this year. It's just not your Sunday. But I do agree with you. I believe this Jaguars team has some real upside if they can start to put performances together on a consistent week-to-week basis, especially Trevor Lawrence. But right now, there are just too many mistakes for them to, I think, be put inside of the top 7 to 8, what I view as a Super Bowl bubble. As of right now, I think they're a solid team. I think they're a playoff team. But right now, there are just too many mistakes. They have 11 turnovers in opponents' territory. That trend cannot continue going forward. That has to be cleaned up. They're still not great on third down. They've gotten better. I just think there are too many mistakes. I like Doug Peterson. I think Trevor Lawrence has a ton of upside. If they start to put things together, they will move back up in my rankings because I do like the potential of this team. They're actually right now 6th in EPA per drop back allowed in passing defense. I love their running back. I like their weapons. I like Christian Kirk. I like Calvin Ridley. I like Evan Ingram, the tight end. Um, the offensive line has been good enough, but it's just these mistakes, whether they're penalties, turnovers, and can you trust them against the elite teams as we move down the stretch into post Thanksgiving football? Like we're almost to that point in the season where things get real. The weather
Yeah.
gets colder. Um, you're playing in tougher environments, games that really matter for playoff implications. We're past the halfway point of the season now. Your team's probably banged up at some point. You have to deal with injuries. So it's not because they lost to San Francisco that they moved down. I just probably was a little too high on them last week, and they still make too many mistakes for me to really trust them over some of the teams that I have ranked ahead of them.
Yeah, and the interesting part is it's not a Trevor Lawrence problem at all. Trevor Lawrence, I thought, has been pretty good this season. I think the receivers are letting him down a little bit in terms of some of the drops that we've seen. We saw the one with Tank Bigsby go right through his hands, end up being a pick six. Stuff like that has been happening all year long for them. So they just got to clean that up.
Who do you have at number 8?
Number 8, I have the Cincinnati Bengals at number 8, and I know that Joe Burrow has gotten injured and all of that, but it's we'll just have to wait and see on that. And like I said, I'm not going to adjust my rankings based on what happened tonight because I had them all written down and ready to go beforehand. But if this Joe Burrow injury does end up being significant and he does miss time, then that changes things. It really does, because now I believe they're 0-3 in the division. I'm pretty sure because they lost 2 early in the year. They already got swept by Baltimore, and they lost 1 to Cleveland, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
So Cincinnati's got a lot of work to do. They've got a major hill to climb, and they're going to need Joe Burrow.
They do need Joe Burrow. They're now 4-game winning streak. That was great. And I think Nick Wright on FS1 earlier today made a great point. The Bengals, provided that they have their quarterback in Joe Burrow, on a week-to-week basis, are possibly, you can argue, the most dangerous team in the National Football League. Now, I don't know if I would make that argument, but they're up there with the dangerous of the dangerous. Like that team can beat anyone on any given Sunday. But now you look at their situation coming off this game against Baltimore, where I'm optimistic, just looking at and reading some stuff on Twitter, that Joe Burrow will eventually come back this year, even if he has to miss maybe a couple weeks, which wouldn't actually be ideal for them because they have another divisional game next week against Pittsburgh that they really can't lose. And then there are tougher games after that. So even if it's only like a 2 or 3 week injury that he's out for, it's not ideal at all. You'd like to have your franchise quarterback this time of year, and that's not, me being, that's obvious, but
yeah, that goes without saying.
But I think he made a great point when he said that, and this was earlier today, if they lose tonight, which they did, they now, after a 5-game winning streak, fall to 5-5, 2 games lost in a row. And I know this was on a short week on the road at Baltimore, and Cincinnati historically the past decade has been terrible in primetime road games. They've lost 24 of their last 25 primetime road games, dating back to 1998 or something like that.
Does that include playoffs too?
I don't know if that includes the playoffs.
Okay,
I
gotcha.
don't think that. I think that includes just the regular season.
Right.
But I would assume because that wouldn't make any sense if it included the play.
Right. Hmm.
Um, Now you're 5-5, and not only are you 0-3 against your division, but you're 1-5 against your competitors in the AFC. Teams that are also vying for playoff positions. As right now, there are 14 teams with 4 or more wins in the AFC. 14 of the 16 teams in the AFC have 4 or more wins, and you're sitting here at 500. You feel pretty good about yourself. You've played really good against the NFC, but unfortunately against the AFC, you haven't been great. And now there's some questions about your quarterback. But with all that being said, I'm going to be honest with you. Before the Deshaun Watson news came down, I had Cleveland in this spot because I believe in Cleveland's defense. I think they're still possibly the best in football. I believe in their offensive line. I like their running game, even without Nick Chubb. I just have a bunch of questions about the quarterback. And I don't think it would be fair to say Cleveland's a Super Bowl team right now with a Dorian Thompson Robinson, or a PJ Walker. So I'm going to actually switch them out for Cincinnati, but either one of these teams, depending on what the Burrow news is, could very well, warrant being lower if the Joe Burrow injury ends up being something that's at least a 2 to 3 week type thing. But I do think Cincinnati, with the way that they started to run the football, their weapons, I believe they were missing T. Higgins tonight, I think. So that didn't really help them at all. And I still think they have a defense that gets after the quarterback and is really fundamentally sound. So, and Baltimore is a really good team. Like, that was going to be a hard game to win anyway. Going to Baltimore on a short week, I mean, and
Yeah.
Baltimore is like the total opposite of Cincinnati. They've been excellent at home in prime time the past 5 to 10 years. And I think Baltimore, as you're going to see, I'm really high on Baltimore.
Yep.
So I probably like Cleveland's defense better, but I think Cincinnati is the team that, as of right now, until we hear on Burrow, is the team more likely to get in the playoffs and mess around and go farther if they do get there.
Yeah.
So that's who I have at number 8, although there are questions there.
Right. Okay. At number 7, I have the Miami Dolphins. And I would say it's not even by any fault of their own that they moved down on my list this week. They were on the bye week, so it's not like they lost this week or anything. But I just think the teams ahead of them are better up front in the trenches. I have questions about their offensive line a little bit in pure drop back situations, and the balance in terms of running the football hasn't been as good the last few games against the better competition. Obviously, they get Devon Achane back this week. That's going to help a lot. But um, I think Miami right now, they're still, in the mix of this thing. They're going to, you know, with how good their offense is, be in just about every game they play. Just because, I mean, we saw it against Kansas City. They get down 21-0, but they made that game a game very quickly to start the second half. So I think they're in the mix of Super Bowl teams, but for right now, I'm putting them at 7.
I would agree with you on this ranking. I have Dolphins at number 7. Um, if you look at their schedule, I think it sets up very well for the next month or so. They get the Raiders, who are actually playing better football right now. So that I'm not saying any of these games are going to be easy, but Raiders, Commanders, Titans, and then the Jets twice over the next 5 weeks. That's not in any sort of order. That's what I wrote down in my notes. If you win, I could see the Dolphins easily winning 3 out of 5, at least probably 4 out of 5, maybe even 5 out of 5. They set themselves up very well. I still the later part, the latter half of their schedule, really the latter quarter of their schedule is where I think they'll really get to prove themselves and how good they are and how far they can go in the playoffs. But as of right now, you're absolutely right. When Tua gets protection, this offense is absolutely scintillating. I thought their defense played really well last week against the Chiefs. They only gave up those 14 points early on in the game. And then that defense, I think, really kept them in the game. Bradley Chubb looked really good last week. He had maybe the best game of his Dolphins career with a sack and a forced fumble. They now have Jalen Ramsey healthy, Xavier Howard healthy, Javon Holland healthy in their secondary. And I think this Vic Fangio coach defense sets up very well for this latter half of the season when, it get the conditions get tougher, it gets colder. I do have some of the questions you have up front in the trenches, but ultimately I think they're going to be able to score enough points to keep themselves in games. And I do think that they are capable of beating some of these elite teams, even though they really haven't done it yet. They actually kept that game in Philadelphia close for like the first 3 quarters, and they kept the Kansas City game close as well. I think they're really close. So I would have the Dolphins at 7. I think there's a good chance right now that they're going to win their division, and if you win your division, you guarantee yourself a home playoff game, and anything can happen really from that point on with how many weapons you have offensively, the cleverness of this offense.
Right.
So, yeah, I think Miami. I might not be quite as high on them as maybe some others. I'm not just talking about maybe even you. I'm talking about other people that I hear talk football on the podcast I listen to. I think Miami's a really good football team, and I think their schedule sets up really well. And I think that's important this time of year. I really do. So
Yeah. If some of the teams in front of them happen to drop a game or two, then they'll be in a good spot to pounce and maybe snatch the 1 seed away even. But for number 6, that's where I have the Detroit Lions. I moved them ahead of Miami because, like I said, I just believe in them more in the trenches. They've shown that even against great teams, outside of Baltimore, of course. But that was just like that game just wasn't their day, really. But in pretty much every situation, their offensive line is going to make an impact on the game. And they went out against the Chargers. The Chargers obviously aren't a great defense, but just completely gashed them at the point of attack. Every single run play, it felt like you'd see a guard just leading the way 7-8 yards down the field, and that was every single play. So this Lions team, they're just as dangerous as any. You get them in a playoff scenario, and you're that good up front in the offensive line, and you're that good at running the football with this 2-headed monster. They can beat anybody.
I agree with you once again. Detroit's number 6 in my ranking. Exciting 41-38 victory over the Chargers. Their offense is humming, or it has been most of the season. Jared Goff threw for 333 yards and 2 touchdowns. But really, what spearheaded their offense in that attack in a game where they put up 533 yards of offense was the fact that they averaged 8.3 yards per play. And of course, you had the running game, 12 rushes, 116 yards, and a score for David Montgomery, 14 carries for 77 yards and 2 touchdowns, and some explosive plays for Jahmyr Gibbs, along with Amon-Ra St. Brown, who had a huge day through the air with 8 catches for 156 yards and a touchdown. They create big plays. They're running the football. I think they have a top 6 offensive line in the league. And their defense, it's an aggressive defense. They're going to give up yards. And there will be weeks where they look better, some weeks than they do other weeks. But I still believe that their pass rush is better than people, or more capable than people think. And I think they're just a really well-coached team. Love Ben Johnson. I think Dan Campbell's excellent. I think he'd actually be kind of a dream hire for A&M. Not to drag us off topic, but he has ties to A&M. I think that'd be an excellent hire. I don't think it's going to happen. They're not going to drag him away from this situation.
Yeah, no.
And when the Lions are, I think, a Super Bowl contending team. But yeah, I really like this Lions team. Their offense now ranks 4th in offensive DVOA. They keep showing that they have a variety of ways to beat you, and I think that helps you this time of year. Now, it gets a little bit more interesting with the Lions, and this is the last point I'll make, because of the way that the Vikings have been playing lately. Those games could get a little bit more interesting than I previously thought they may be, with, the Vikings bringing Dobbs over in the situation that they have with their defense playing a lot better. But I still think the Lions are the best team in this division, and they have an offense to win a Super Bowl. It'll just come down to whether or not that defense can stay consistent.
Hold their own. Yeah.
Yep. So I had the Cowboys at number 5. How about you?
Yeah, I had the Cowboys at 5 as well. It really just comes down to what I've been saying all year. Just got to be patient. Can't really move them up just yet until we see it in January. I mean, what we've been seeing from Dak, though, is really encouraging as a Cowboys fan. I mean, the last, 3 or 4 weeks of football have been really stellar from Dak. And, after the 49ers game, he got a lot of heat. But, I mean, the reality is the dude just wins football games. There's not a lot of guys that have the winning percentage of Dak Prescott in NFL history, even. So he's not perfect. He's not, Mahomes or anything. But, I mean, it's clear that Dak took that 49ers loss to heart, and he's been balling out ever since. So good for him.
Yeah, Dak's been absolutely fantastic for the past month plus. I think CeeDee Lamb right now is a top 5 wideout in football, the way he's been playing. I don't think that's a hot take. Prescott's on a heater. Of course, I agree with you. They still got to prove it in January. But as of right now, they are destroying whatever comes in front of them if it is mediocre to below average. And I actually thought the loss against Philadelphia impressed me. I thought they played a really competitive game. It was just a little bit too much to overcome in the end. It looks like their next 2 opponents are Carolina and Washington. So those of course are teams that you never want to overlook anyone on any given Sunday. But if they continue to do what they have done, they set themselves up very well to potentially get to 7-3, maybe even 8-3. They're beating up on divisional rivals. It'll all come down to these upcoming games against Philadelphia in a couple more weeks. Do they play Jacksonville? I think they do. There are a
I
couple
think in
games in there.
December at some point they do play
Yeah,
Jacksonville. Yeah.
yeah. There are a couple games in there that I'll be tuned into. They do play the Chargers. I know that should be a fun game to watch at the very least. Yeah, with their defensive front, Dan Quinn coached defense, the way that Deron Bland has filled in for um, Diggs, the corner, with Gilmore and everyone. I mean, I think the Cowboys are legitimately a top 5, top 6 team. It just comes down to January, and we really can't talk about that until we see the matchups and how everything sets up.
Yeah. One little nugget that I'll say on Dallas before we move on is in the San Francisco game, they were up until that point were, I think, 16th in the NFL in using motion. I think at like 41% of the time. Since that game, they've used motion 58% of the time, and they've moved up until the top 10 in that category. So a little bit more creativity here and there, a little bit more movement and motion pre-snap, I think has helped this offense a lot.
I have a stat. First 5 games, Dak Prescott, 1,061 yards, 4 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, a 67% completion percentage, and a passer rating of 70. Last 4 games, 1,354 yards, 12 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, a 72% completion percentage, and a passer rating of 125. He's also, according to PFF, the highest graded quarterback under pressure this year. There are stats for days on Twitter of Dak Prescott or pertaining to Dak Prescott. So just to throw it out there, since I am somewhat obsessed with numbers. Number 4, I have the Baltimore Ravens. What do you have at number 4?
Yeah, same. I have the Ravens as well. It's pretty simple to me. I think the lack of closing out games, I mean, that is concerning, definitely, but I do think some of it can be attributed to focus a little bit. I think in a big game scenario, I still do trust this team, even though maybe I shouldn't because they haven't shown any reason for me to trust them. But I think Lamar is at that point where I think things will come around once they get into a playoff scenario to where you can trust him. But we'll see on that. Their defense is still one of the best in football. I think the one thing I would say with their defense is losing Marlon Humphrey really does hurt a lot. I think he went down with an Achilles tear, if I'm not mistaken, last week.
Yep.
So he's their top corner, and when he's in the lineup, they're a completely different secondary. So losing him hurts, but I think they're in a good spot here. They're going to be right there in the mix, and if I were to pick right now, they would be my pick along with Kansas City to get to the AFC Championship. So,
yeah, they're going to be extremely tough, an extremely tough out in the playoffs. It's setting up to where they could possibly even get that number 1 seed. Baltimore, and this was coming into tonight, has trailed for less than 28 minutes this entire year. And I do not believe, well, they did trail at one point tonight. They did trail 10-7, but that was for a very short amount of time. Very brief amount of time. The rest of the game, they pretty much controlled it. That's one of the 5 best marks through 10 games, of course, tonight being their 11th game in the last 40 years. The other teams in that top 5, the 1984 Dolphins, the 1990 Giants, the 1998 Broncos, and the 2007 Patriots, all of which ended up going to the Super Bowl. Um, that's good news. The bad news is all those other teams that I just mentioned in that conversation with Baltimore and what they've accomplished up to this point in this year, all those teams started 10-0. The Ravens coming into the night 7-3, and that's because, as you mentioned, they've kind of stumbled over themselves. They've controlled a lot of these games, but mistakes, not catching the football, penalties, uh, lapses in the second half on defense, some injuries have caught them a couple times, and they haven't finished games the way that you think they maybe should. They blew a 14-point fourth quarter lead just last week. Of course, they probably have forgotten about that now, or they've gotten that taste out of their mouth, at least for the short term, after tonight's win. But the defense is lights out. The passing game is more spread out than I think I've ever seen it with Lamar Jackson. Losing Mark Andrews is killer, though. That's going to be. I believe in Todd Monken. I believe in the way their offense looked, even with Mark Andrews going out after the first drive and him possibly being out for the season. The weapons that they have in this passing game make me feel a little bit better about this injury than I would have in past years with the emergence of Zay Flowers. Odell Beckham had a huge game tonight. Rashad Bateman's involved. Sometimes they get Devin Duvernay involved. They have ways. Justice Hill. What's the running back's name?
Gus Edwards.
Gus
Keaton
Edwards.
Mitchell.
And with the added element of Lamar Jackson and what he can do and how he can hurt you, I still believe in their offense. They need to clean up some stuff for sure later on in games, but they're going to be a tough out with this defense that leads the NFL in sacks, I believe, still. They do lose Marlon Humphrey, but I think with their pass rush, the way that they defend the run, I just think they're a really well-rounded team, and Lamar Jackson is playing, for the most part, at an MVP caliber level. So I think the Ravens are bona fide, Super Bowl contender right now, even with the Mark Andrews news.
I think so too. Definitely. Okay. Now for our top three. The order for these three, I think you could argue any way, like any possible combination out of the three. But for me, I went with Kansas City at number 3 for now. And it's a tough one, but I just I still think they're the favorite to make it to the Super Bowl. But if I were to place them on a neutral field against, say, the Niners or the Eagles, spoiler alert, I would take those teams over them. And it's close though. I still think Kansas City. I mean, the fact that their defense is so young and already so good is just scary to me. Chris Jones is quietly having another amazing season. The emergence of Trent McDuffie, of course, has been amazing to watch. And then offensively, they're still trying to find it a little bit. And coming off of a bye week now, I'm hoping they get Rashee Rice going a little bit more down the field. But that's really my only gripe with them. Other than just the downfield passing game and the consistency of it, that's really the only thing you can point to and say, oh, they're missing that. And that's one of those things where, I mean, you have Mahomes at quarterback. If the receivers just execute, then that's not going to be an issue.
Yeah, I have the San Francisco 49ers at number 3. This is a team that we consistently see when they're healthy embarrass their opponents. They dominated the Jaguars 34-3, as we all know, and we recapped on on Monday night. If you missed that, go back and watch that. We greatly appreciate. They get Trent Williams back, they get Debo Samuel back, and they immediately look like the team that I think they are. The more encouraging part of that victory, though, was their defense. It felt like, especially during that 3-game losing streak, the pass rush wasn't as ferocious or effective. They weren't tackling in space in the secondary. It just wasn't the aggressive Niners defense that we had seen, and they got back to that on Sunday. They held the Jaguars to 221 total yards, 12 first downs, and they forced 4 turnovers. And they got after Trevor Lawrence. 5 sacks. Chase Young addition has only made that pass rush stronger. They've moved Steve Wilks down from the booth to the sideline. When they're healthy, they look like a cheat code on offense and defense. And I think, as you said, these 3 teams at the top, you can flip-flop them around. I put the Chiefs at number 2. I have some of the concerns that you have with their downfield passing game, but I just think their defense, even though their offense is scoring only 21 points per game since the beginning of October, which is tied for 16th in the league. So it's been kind of league average for the better part of a month now. Keeping everything afloat is their defensive coordinator, Steve Spagnuolo. They had the second most sacks this year coming into this week with 31. And they're just a really sound, young, athletic, long defense that I believe will stand up in big moments.
Yeah.
They've proven that. Chris Jones, as long as Chris Jones is healthy, which he is, as long as Travis Kelce is healthy, and as long as that number 15 is playing quarterback, they still remain, as you said, the favorite to get out of the AFC once again. And right now, they're sitting in the 1 seed. If they have home field advantage, I still believe that they'll find a way.
Yeah.
They'll find a way. So that's not to say they're not concerns. You can nitpick their offense a little bit, but we're really splitting hairs.
Yeah. It's hard to really tear into them when you have number 15 at quarterback. And on top of that, like there were, there was a slow start in 2019 when they won the Super Bowl, and then they didn't, play all that great to start the year last year in certain ways as well. So it's like they've shown that they can right the ship, and it is a little bit later in the year now, but I'm not completely, writing it off that they're just going to turn this thing around now that they have a bye week. But for me at number 2, I had San Francisco. Chase Young, I thought looked great and really, I think ignited some of the other guys on that D line as well. The fact that they're like, oh, we got another dog on this D line, let's get after it. And I think it kind of reinvigorated like that entire group. Javon Hargrave looked great. I mean, Eric Armstead was living in the backfield. Nick Bosa, of course. I mean, that Niner defense, they put a lot on, their pass rush getting home. And, for a few weeks there, they really weren't doing that. So now that they have Chase Young in the building, now that they're healthy along the D line, I really don't see that being an issue. And then offensively, I think last week may have been Brock Purdy's best game as a pro, which is saying a lot. I mean, he had some throws that were like, I would call them stank face throws. Like you see the throw and you're just like, ooh, okay, like, okay, Brock. Like, I mean, throwing it into tight windows. I mean, he had that throw to Kittle down the right side with a dude in his face, put it right on the money. I mean, can't really say anything bad about that performance from last week.
Nope. Okay. We made good time. We're down to number one. Obviously, we match up here. The Eagles right now are number one in our power rankings. I just see a team that can win in multiple ways on offense, a trustworthy head coach, an MVP caliber quarterback, strong veteran leadership on both sides of the ball, and they're unstoppable in short yardage situations. They're not perfect, but they belong at the top. They're winning games in a variety of ways. And Jalen Hurts this year has still been really, really good. There's not really a lot to say about the Eagles other than I'm really looking forward to Eagles Chiefs Monday night.
Yep. Yeah, and that is probably the best primetime game we've had all season. That's going to be one that's, might be an all timer. Super Bowl rematch. It's going to be fun, and we're gonna learn a bit about both those teams
Yep.
Monday night.
Yep, we will. Do you have anything else to add about Week 11 in the NFL that's upcoming? What you maybe saw? I know you were at a soccer game, but what you saw or didn't see tonight? Anything on your mind before we wrap this thing up?
Well, the little bit that I saw the touchdown that Lamar threw to Nelson Aguilar, the one that got tipped straight into his hands and he took it to the house. That was a bizarre play. That was just one where I was like, let's see what's going on in this game. I just turned it on my phone and it was that play. I was like, oh, okay. But yeah, the Joe Burrow injury, when I saw that Jake Browning was in the game, I immediately texted you. Was like, wait, what happened to Joe Burrow? Because that Thursday night game was one we were looking forward to. I think that's probably one of the problems with Thursday night games. Is not only that you have less time to prepare, but also I think the fact that it fucks up the player's body clock leads to more injuries as well. And I don't know if there's any numbers to back that up, but that's just what it feels like to me.
Yeah, and I'll tell you the thought that came to my mind when I watched not only the video of the Burrow injury, when it happened, how it happened, and potentially some lip reading of what he said on the sideline. But when I sent you that video, and I don't know if you watched it or not, of him trying to throw the ball on the sideline, I'm not a doctor. I hope Burrow's okay. Because it's better for the NFL and better for ratings. It's just better if one of the elite quarterbacks is on the field. But when I watched that video, for whatever reason, my mind went back to what happened last year's playoffs with Brock Purdy when he got hurt. And I know it was in kind of a different fashion on a different kind of play where he was getting hit. But the way Burrow just kind of struggled to grip the ball, I don't know if it was a wrist injury or it could have something to do with his elbow. And I think that would probably be the worst case scenario. Because obviously with Brock Purdy, it ended up being Tommy John that he had to have done. And that would put Burrow out for the season, which we hope isn't the case. But my mind, for whatever reason, watching that video just kind of went back to that injury. I'm not saying that's the injury, but it sort of reminded me of that. So we hope it's not that. If anything, we hope it's just kind of a short-term thing where he might be out a couple weeks and he can get back for the most important part of the season. But yeah, hope Burrow's okay, man.
Yeah. I guess I'll have to um, look and watch the play and what actually happened later. But man, I just that's disappointing. This game was supposed to be really good and just was supposed to be like such a great way to start the week, and now we have to deal with another star player injury.
There
Um,
was two things. There was a video or surveillance. I don't know if it was surveillance footage or just a video captured of Joe Burrow earlier in the week with some kind of brace or something on his wrist.
hmm.
If you haven't seen that, I can send that to you once we wrap this thing up, or you can go find it on Twitter. So maybe that has something to do with it. And then number two is it happened on a non-contact screen pass out
Hmm.
to the right side of the field, where after Burrow threw the ball, he just bent over in pain, grabbing
Interesting.
at his arm, or his wrist or whatever it was. It's hard to tell. So yeah, I mean, we hope it's all good. Right now in the AFC North, you're looking at the Ravens sitting pretty at 8-3. We have the Browns Steelers matchup this weekend, and the Bengals sitting at 5-5. It's an exciting time though in the NFL. Or this next week, after this week, we of course get the Thanksgiving Day games, and then we get a Black Friday game for the first time ever.
Yeah,
There will be
that'll be kind of strange.
It will be, but it's going to happen. And then we get, football. It's rivalry week in college football next weekend. So we'll get all the great rivalry games that we get every year. Um, and then we'll get more great NFL football. So I think that's going to do it here, right around a good, solid 55 ish minutes here on our post week 10, pre week 11 top 10 NFL power rankings. Leave comments. What do you think? Who are the top 10 teams in the league? And don't just say your top 10 teams and not give your criteria
Yeah,
for
give us some explanation.
yeah.
We'd love to hear about that. But if you disagreed with any of our takes, tell us about that as well. I think there were a couple that we disagreed on tonight. I think just in the top three, and then maybe with our number 10 team, I ended up switching out the Bills for the Texans in the end. But yeah, it was a solid episode. I did want to mention I went to the U.S. versus Trinidad game, U.S. men's national team game before this podcast, and I'm not gonna go on a huge spiel about it, but for like 80 minutes there, it was looking pretty rough, and then they spurred off 3 goals in the last 10 minutes of the game, so it was at least we got some scoring in the end.
Yeah, that's good. Was that at Q2 Stadium?
Yep, Q2.
Nice. I've been there for Austin FC game one time, and it was the total opposite of what you described. They did not score any goals. So,
Oof. Yeah.
but we did have good seats. We were second row.
Nice.
So that's going to do it. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And just like, well, I don't actually have a closing for tonight. Do you have
Um,
you wanna wrap us up?
just like oh no, just like Jim Harbaugh's respect from everybody. We were going, gone. I guess. I don't know. I couldn't think of anything.
Peace out, guys.
Peace.